Hello, and welcome to my channel. I'm Layson Race, Executive Director of the Layson Race Center for Racial Equity, and we are on all platforms. If you like us, please do be sure to subscribe and follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, our own website, and the Layson Race Cafe. Today, I want to be able to talk to you about a couple of memes that I saw that tie in so nicely with what we've been doing here. And they're on my phone. Here we go. And I thought that they are certainly worth sharing with you and very, very prescient to what we've been talking about these last few days about cowardice, courage, community, and commitment. It also has to do with change. To be able to have the courage to be able to face change and to roll with change, and absolutely to be able to have the sort of resilience that's necessary to walk through change, which is in itself can be sometimes a crucible, with our praxis and our commitment intact. When we talk about change, usually we can talk about the fun stuff, and we will, and there's a lot of amazing things going on. We are getting ready as the country is opening up, and particularly here in San Diego, to start doing, are you ready for it? I am so excited. Lace on Race Lives. You got that right. I will be coming to you in person. In San Diego, we're going to be doing a few test runs in our new space, which is so exciting for me. We will be opening up the sign up. It'll be limited, yes, because right now we're getting our sea legs. We want to see what works, what doesn't work. Use some of the San Diego folks as kind of a focus group. If possible, we'll also be running that live on Zoom. So even if you're not in San Diego, you can still participate. But it will be really something to be able to have people right in front of me, not me imagining people, but actual people right in front of me as we talk about topics and issues that resonate with our North Star and keep us on the right track. That is terrific. And so one of the things we're going to be talking about during those Lace on Race lives is this series, Courage, Cowardice, Commitment, Community. And as I've been thinking about those 4 C's, as I'm beginning to call them, of course, when I'm doing research, I go down other rabbit holes. And when I am saying that I'm doing research, sometimes I'm on my Facebook feed, don't tell staff. And I get some amazing memes that pop up. And one of them, as I'm looking at it right now here on my phone, is something that I've been wanting to share with you for a few days now. When we talk about change, that doesn't mean putting lipstick on a pig and deciding that the change that we're talking about is only going to be cosmetic. It's only going to be on the surface. We have lived through almost a year and a half now of pandemic life. And now that things are opening up, the questions are going to be, what is it going to look like when we open back up? What are we going to look like as a society? How are we going to interact with our friends, with our coworkers? A lot of times people have said, for years, even decades now, we need to press the reset button on a couple of things. And guess what? You're absolutely right. We need to press the reset button. And in a way, if we allow it to, the pandemic did that for us, or has the potential of doing that for us. And I really, really, really want to encourage us to think of it in this way here as well. Here's the meme, and I think it is so important and so thought-provoking, in fact, that it actually made me stop in my tracks and really ponder it when I first looked at it. Let me read it to you. I'll have a link for it in the comments, or I will post the meme that I have on my phone in the comments so that you can see it too. It says, "Love to have life forcibly put on pause for a year due to the myriad flaws of my society, only to immediately return to doing things more or less the exact same way right afterwards." Yeah, that hit me hard. We can't go back to doing what we were doing before, not in our relationships, not in our praxis. There are people who are going to breathe a huge sigh of relief, and then they're going to say, oh, well, no need to press the reset button. If it was working for me a year and a half ago, it should be working for me now. Here's the thing though, it wasn't working a year and a half ago. And to be able to tell the truth about that and to be able to take an honest assessment of who it wasn't working for a year and a half ago is going to put us on the right track as we walk ever, ever so resolutely toward the North Star. We have seen what disparities and inequities look like when people are dedicated, hell-bent even, to doing things the exact same way and putting various shades of L'Oreal lipstick on a very ugly pig. The medical system did not work for wide swaths of people during this pandemic. It's gotten a little bit better now, but we need to remember that it's getting better because the people who were considered important cut the line first. We need to look at the workplace. There is an article that I'm going to be sharing with you and commenting on top of from The Atlantic that's talking about work and about the fact that there are winners and losers in this new work dynamic. And that work dynamic spills into our personal lives, and it's an easy pivot to race. Those people with master's degrees and above actually saw a bump, both in their quality of life, because most of them were able to work from home. Over 50% of people with master's degrees and above were able to work from home during this pandemic. They saw no loss of income, and in some cases, they saw their income jump. People more in the middle had more challenges, but people at the bottom of the income and class distribution saw no benefit from this pandemic. Absolutely none. And that is a conversation that needs to be had. Most people who were considered essential workers, that were not medical personnel, and that we said hi and we gave fist bumps to at Trader Joe's, they still had to go to work every single day. There was usually someone in an office that had to schlep into work and answer the phones every single day. There were skeleton crews in some offices, including my own office that I used to be in before I retired from the county. All of this makes for a tiered system during this pandemic that was always there, but came into sharper relief. And we need to be able to talk about that. Those in the middle of the income distribution and class distribution had less autonomy than those at the top, but more autonomy than those at the bottom. We've talked about these kinds of quadrants before, particularly when it comes to our work lives, that there are jobs with high autonomy and jobs with high responsibility. And so in those quadrants, you have high responsibility, high autonomy, low autonomy. The worst place to be on those four quadrants, the bottom left, is high responsibility but low autonomy, where you're considered essential, or more accurately, your job is considered essential, but you're not. For those of you who read one of the pieces of when I was getting vaccinated and heard the story about the two women in the observation room that were talking about the fact that their sons, both of the women were of color, so their sons were of color, who felt symptoms of COVID, who felt sick, who were scared, who had to buy their own protective equipment, and who had to show up either to the grocery store or to where they delivered groceries upon fear of losing their jobs, who had to pay out of pocket to keep themselves as safe as possible because their employers refused to do it for them. That's true across the board. This time last year, during the beginning of the pandemic, major retailers and some smaller retailers were making it a big point to talk about hazard pay and how they were providing their frontline staff with equipment to keep them safe, and even a pump up of pay, sometimes as high as $5 an hour, to keep these essential workers happy and safe. What we don't really hear about is how they quietly snatched back those protections and those pay raises. That means something because the people at the bottom of that income and class distribution are disproportionately of color. Things have changed for us, but did it change in major ways for the people who we say we stand with and for? And if not, why not? In some of the essays that I've written over the last few months, and particularly as things have been slowly opening up, we've been talking about the things that you can do. And you can. You can. The question is whether or not you're willing to do it. In terms of how we can leverage our privilege, leverage our social and our economic capital in solidarity with people who do not have the sort of capital that we have. If we're going into a bank, we can ask, where are the branches located? Are any located in disproportionately Black and brown neighborhoods? And if not, why not? If you're looking at your own healthcare group, you can ask, where are your offices located? Is it harder for people to come to you? Do you have after hours so people on second shifts or staggered shifts are able to come in and have the same number of services and the same quality of services that other people have? And crucially, do you treat everyone the same? Right now, we know that the answer is no, they don't. We need to be able to flex our privilege to make sure that that is remembered. We saw what it looked like during the pandemic, and we can't go back. Let's look at education for a moment. We can't go back there either. There are people at the top of the income distribution who were able to hire nannies and tutors to keep the curriculum going and to make sure that there was not educational drift or retention drift from kids. People in the middle had a hybrid. While some of them were working at home, they were also, with one hand as they were typing out a memo, they were helping their kid with homework. And then there were those who, at the less privileged side of the distribution, had to go out to work. So they didn't have time, either because they were at their job or they come back exhausted from their job, to do what people in the middle and upper echelons were able to do with their children. And also, it was harder for people in poor schools to be able to get the equipment that was necessary to be able to do distance learning the most effectively. That is why about 10 months ago, we participated with Kinfolk Collective for the Chromebooks initiative, where we distributed over 100 Chromebooks. That was a huge initiative. I am so glad we did it. It is nowhere near enough. And so now, when people are opening back up and trying to figure out how this is going to work, we need to be able to take the lessons of the pandemic and make sure that we do it differently and better. There are some things that happened that were good during the pandemic. We need to find ways so that receptionists can be receptionists in the safety of their living rooms, just like account executives can. We need to find ways to make sure that protective equipment for essential workers that cannot stay home. We do need people at Albertsons and Vons and Ralph's and Kroger's and Piggly Wiggly. How do we keep them safe? How do we make sure that they can afford the items that they're ringing up for us? We need to look at pay scales for the new gig economy, for the new 1099 workers who have all of the responsibilities of being self-employed and none of the perks. We need to take a look at that, and we need to take a hard look at these new economy players that consider themselves tech players, but again, lipstick on a pig. You still need someone to deliver the milk and the potatoes and the eggs, even though it feels high tech when you're clicking the button on Amazon. We still need someone to bring your order of Thai food from Lemon Grove, Thai, to my house. We need to make sure that we are paying them fairly and not dependent on whether or not the person on the end is going to tip them well, which means we need to look at how people are paid across the board. We need to take a hard look, particularly when it comes to hospitality, about the fact that people are allowed to be paid sub-minimum wage because the tips are supposed to make up for it. That has not been happening. It is a different game. And to go back to the old ways that we were doing things is yet another way of entrenching inequality, of entrenching disparity. There are lessons to be learned from this pandemic that we need to retain, that we need to inculcate, and that we need to implement as this country opens back up. Otherwise, the two tiers that have been shown to be during this pandemic will only become more of a gulf. How does this figure into race? Again, people at the lowest ends of the income and class distribution are disproportionately Black and brown. And because of the decimation of unions, it is very hard for them to organize. Although unions like the United Food and Commercial Workers Union and SEIU, Service Employees International, which was my union when I worked for the county, has been doing yeoman work in organizing and advocating for people who are technically not members because they're not unionized. But insofar as we know that there needs to be a floor, not just for unionized workers, but for everyone else, if we help those at the bottom of the income distribution with solidarity, with opening our mouths, with leveraging our power and our privilege, then it works out for all. So we need to look at policy on a legislative level, and we need to look at policy on a corporate level, and we need to be able to hold feet to fire. It's not enough, for instance, that a retailer isn't Walmart. Target is actually no better than Walmart when it comes to employee wages, when it comes to advocating and lobbying for policies that hurt workers. So on the one hand, yes, there are the usual bad players that we all know to stay away from, but we need to look at our alternatives. We need to see not just what we can do in terms of leveraging our power, but crucially, what we are actually willing to do. Otherwise, the last year and a half of coronavirus pandemic living will be for naught. As we talk about cowardice, courage, commitment, and community, all of this ties in. All of this ties in. One of the things that are most important is that we need to broaden out the idea of what community is. We need to broaden out the idea that if it's okay for me but not okay for someone else, that I guess we just have to live with it. No, we don't. No, we don't. There is an amazing African proverb that I love. No one eats until everyone has a bowl. And what we have seen pre-pandemic, but in sharp relief during the pandemic, is that there were people slurping. People were slurping loudly in front of other people. Think about how the vaccination rollout happened. People slurping in front of other people while people had empty bowls. Or more accurately, didn't have bowls at all. That is not how we do it at Lace on Race. We need to take the ethos and the praxis that we are learning here and to still don't have a door, still take it outside. We need to be able to have the courage to ask the hard questions of our retailers, of our medical community, of our workplaces. This is a huge deal. In another essay that I wrote about a year and a half ago, and you can find it in the pinned post, I think it's there. There was I think I wrote the essay in terms of that day. Somewhere in late winter, early spring, that's called Equal Pay Day, where finally women get to catch up to what men make. That's for white women. For women of color, it's a lot later, kind of about this time. And we were talking about some of the places where it's considered to be the best places to work for women. And I talked about an article that I had read in Working Women magazine, and I'm not sure if that magazine is around, but every year they used to do a list, bragging rights for the best places to work. And some of the usual players were there: Ford, General Motors, some surprising ones, Mary Kay, for instance. Walmart, for years, was considered one of the best employers for women. That was before Barbara Ehrenreich and nickeled and dimed. But here's why Walmart was one of the best places. Here's why Walmart made that list. Because in teeny tiny print, teeny tiny, you had to take off your glasses and go like this so you could see it. It was always corporate offices only. So it doesn't matter if the Walmart office in Bentonville, Arkansas was one of the best places to work for women. That's less than 1% of Walmart's workforce. What about the woman in Wichita, Kansas doing a split shift? What about the woman in Chula Vista, California, who was asked to clock out but still finish folding, because after all, you can't leave until you finish folding your area? That happened in Walmart. All of these things are necessary to have in our minds, percolating as we talk about what truly equitable workspaces look like, what truly equitable educational spaces look like, what truly equitable ways that we live in community with each other. Because if I do not think of the woman who is folding shirts off the clock as Walmart, as my neighbor and my community member, I won't see her. I might complain if, there were absolutely no red shirts in the extra large section. I had to look and I found an extra large in the small section. Someone wasn't doing their job. And then you feel like heads will roll. No, no, no. That woman is my neighbor. Someone folded those shirts. And I'm not going to put her job or her livelihood in jeopardy. In fact, I'm going to ask why she was still folding those shirts 40 minutes after she clocked out for the day. For the record, that's free labor. Companies like to talk a lot about wage theft on the employee side, just like they like to talk about workers' compensation. All around San Diego, first with Bonnie Dumanis and now with Summer Stephan, you see billboards with stern-looking sheriffs and stern-looking judges telling us how workers' compensation fraud is a crime. But no one talks about how employers demand PPE, not paid for by themselves, but for their employees, how employers will make you wait until you can clock in and make you wait until you can leave after you clock out. One of the best comedies, more like a dramedy, that we saw, and it was interesting how the last 2 seasons were indeed during the pandemic, was Superstore. And I am still surprised that they were able to get away with bringing up some of the workplace issues that not just retail workers face, but any mid and lower level employee faces. And it became even harder during the pandemic. They told the truth on that show. They did it with laughs, they did it with irony, but they told the truth and the fact of the matter is that right now we can talk all we want to about how everyone has value, but the fact of the matter is, if nothing else, the pandemic showed us that some cohorts were expendable. And there was painfully little pushback. Let's pivot a moment before I close and talk about the Black Spring, which was happening about this time last year. I remember when that was when we started getting national attention and national detractors. But that was when the Vox article came out. That's when I did a couple of interviews for the Washington Post. That's when I was able to do the TV interview. Well, guess what? The same issues that were extant 12 months ago are still extant now. Where are the microphones? Where are the cameras? We're going to be talking about the media's role in the post George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. I'm working on that. I'm researching, but we need to be able to say that we need to not be beholden to and slaves to any given news cycle. Yes, I'm glad that we got a little bit of attention. I'm glad that other commentators and thinkers got attention. I'm glad that money flowed in to some spaces, including ours. That, just like in other spaces, wound up being rather short-lived. But the need is still there. Being beholden to a 24-hour news cycle or even a season, the Black Spring, means that there's an expiration date on it. And so when spring is over, what then? And we saw what happened. There was some remembrance, and we did it here on this channel, we did it here at Lace on Race, about the anniversary of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. But most major news outlets did not give it nearly what it deserved. That's unfortunate. It's also predictable. There is a pattern of the incredibly short attention spans of the media, who have a lot of power. They decide what's in our feeds. They decide what is top of the fold and what gets buried on page 34 or what doesn't make it at all. They decide how they're going to frame it. They decide who the winners and the losers and the villains and the heroes are. We saw it in the pandemic. We saw it in the Black Spring. We cannot depend on those in power, either those in the C-suites and corporations or those in the media, and basically they're kind of the same thing. Because the media is driven by corporations. It is not, with the exception of NPR and PBS, and they're advertiser driven too. They're driven by corporations, which means the media is too. ABC is not a not-for-profit institution. Neither is CNN, neither is Fox, neither is MSNBC. Which means we need to do our own legwork. We need to have really good analyses as to what we're not being told and how it's being spun, what we are allowed to know. There it is, the crux. What are we allowed to know? What are we allowed to think about? There'll be more about what we're allowed to think about and what we are encouraged to move on from and how we need to push back on that. About how sometimes, even though we think of perseveration and of fixating as bad things, what that also means is a singular and distinct and disciplined focus, which we are also discouraged from learning and doing. I love you all. Let's keep walking.